contribute to the family finances. And that was a condition that was experienced by many of us in those days. But that was not to be the end of Joan's education. And I'm sure it won't be long into her presentation before it becomes patently clear that Joan held tight to the values and principles that we were all exposed to during our school life. It was here that we learned that female education was a worthwhile pursuit, that a career was something to which we could all aspire, and that investment in women's education was a good thing. Joan embodies all of those teachings that were so strongly promoted. She has attained a high level of education and spent most of her work life in the field of human services, giving back to our community. She's also a very humble achiever. I think you can only be inspired tonight by her story. So please give a warm welcome to our fellow student and a very accomplished woman, Dr. Joan Brien.
I'm not very good at microphones, is that okay? No? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so thank you for asking me to be here tonight. I've sort of got it written down because there's no way I'll remember it all, so I hope you don't mind if I'm actually reading as I go along. When I was asked to speak to you tonight, I wondered why anyone would want to hear about what I've done since leaving school, because I don't feel that my story is anywhere near as exciting as some of the speakers at our previous reunions. But I was persuaded, so I hope that you won't be too bored with the following. I left school after gaining the intermediate certificate, but during my final year at school, I began thinking about how it would be good to be a science teacher, but I was never very good at mathematics, and I knew I would have to do Maths 1 and 2 if I stayed at school. Despite my lack of confidence in my ability to attempt this, I presented my plans to my parents. Unfortunately, as I was the eldest child of 3 and we were never very well off, I was discouraged from even attempting this, so I left school. My first job after leaving school was sorting dockets at the Newcastle store, where we all sat at a large table sorting thousands of dockets into alphabetical order, after which they were then filed, tallied and then passed on to the accounting machine operators who generated the accounts. After a short time I was promoted to working in an office that dealt directly with the public, and eventually worked my way up to become the public relations officer, handling complaints and solving problems for customers. As you would all know, or I think you would know, at that time women were not generally allowed to continue to work once they were married. Women also got paid less than the males for the same job, unless you worked in particular positions which paid male wages, which in the case of the store was if you worked in the grocery section, you got paid male wages. But up in the office where I was, we were doing probably harder work than the boys, but they got paid more than us. I was not in one of those male paid positions, so in order to be able to continue working once married, I requested to be trained on the accounting machines, because that was one job in the office that did allow women to remain employed once they got married. So I did work as an accounting machine operator until I started a family. And of course, in that day and age, once pregnant, you were gone. I always loved biology at school, and that love stayed with me and led me to always be interested in any new discoveries in medicine or science in general. My father used to tell me that I was a frustrated biologist, and I have to agree that he was right. In the 1970s, the government was encouraging mature-age women to return to the workforce and was subsidising them through Austudy. The resulting publicity started me to think that, despite having 2 children under 6 years of age, I could return to study and hopefully achieve what I constantly yearned for, and that was to be a teacher. It took me 12 months to work on my family to convince them that I was serious and that I wanted to go back and do my HSC, go to Teachers College and train as a primary teacher. I did my HSC at TAFE in 1 year, but during that year, because I selected biology as one of my subjects, my thoughts turned to university. This was a major step up from Teachers College. So then I had to start working on the family again because this was going to be a much bigger deal in their eyes. Nobody in our family had ever been to university, so the idea of university was never in our thoughts and in fact not part of our family vocabulary. I eventually persuaded them that the world would not stop if I went to university and that it would hopefully provide the opportunity to improve our financial situation. I went to the university counsellors to see if I could enrol in physics and chemistry because I'd never done those subjects before. They told me yes, I could enrol in those subjects, but that I would probably fail them in first year, but I could always repeat them the next year. I don't know if they were trying to diplomatically discourage me, but it didn't work. I did go to the University of Newcastle and enrolled to do a science degree and didn't fail those subjects as predicted. I worked extremely hard though to get through physics in particular because I was not very mathematically minded. I remember sitting up till all hours of the night working my way back from the answer in the worked examples in the textbooks to learn how to solve those particular problems. That first year was hard, but it was really the beginning of the rest of my life. I absolutely loved it. In the last year of my degree, I did a postgraduate diploma in primary education concurrently and finally became a teacher. I used to have trouble accepting that because it was so far away from anything that I had ever envisaged could happen to me. As I had a science degree and the department was short of science teachers, after a few years as a casual teacher, I was appointed permanently to Cessnock High School. During my time there, the department created a project for girls, which was designed to encourage girls to take on the higher level maths, physics and chemistry because it was mostly boys doing those subjects for the HSC. I was asked to be the project coordinator for our school and eventually the coordinator for a cluster of schools in the area. We organised a career day for the girls in our schools, produced a handbook with information relevant to the various non-traditional careers for girls, and staff development days for science and maths teachers. One thing that sticks out in my mind was during one of these staff days, the head science teacher from one of the schools pointed out to me and the rest of the teachers there that he had girls doing chemistry and physics, but they don't get outstanding results and they're not at the top of the class. I could hardly believe my ears and asked him why that was so bad or unusual. After all, did all of the boys come top of the class? Of course not, but there seemed to be an expectation that if the girls did these subjects, they had to be better than the boys. One of the things that I introduced to our school was single-sex classes for science. I was lucky in that I had the science master's daughter in my science class, and he was supportive of giving it a go. As science and English ran parallel on the timetable, it meant that we had to have single-sex classes for English as well. I took the girls' class, of course, and the male teacher had the boys. In practical classes, it is generally the boys who light the Bunsen burners and take over as much as possible. Without the boys there, the girls had to do these things, and while they were very talkative, they really learnt a lot. And as we know, this is how girls and women learn. They help each other. This was really successful for the girls, but the boys were not so happy. They reported that they didn't like it because they needed the girls in the class to keep them under control. The girls, on the other hand, except for maybe one or two, really enjoyed it. And when they got to doing the HSC, we had more girls doing the higher maths, physics and chemistry than ever before. Mind you, when it came time to count heads and allocate teachers, the science master was telling me that because he would have trouble having enough teachers for senior physics and chemistry classes, the girls really didn't need to do these subjects. So I went to the girls that morning and told them that they would have pressure on them not to do physics and chemistry today, but if they wanted to do them, they shouldn't change their minds. And so they didn't, they basically stayed there. Although I love teaching and still do, my love for biology took over again. And I used to look at the scientists in their white lab coats when there were stories on TV and yearned to be part of that scene. So I contacted one of my former lecturers from university and asked him if he knew anyone who might have a job for someone like me. I got a job as a research assistant in the Faculty of Medicine at the university, and took 12 months leave of absence from teaching to make sure that it was actually what I wanted to do. And of course it was. I was working on a breast cancer study that was trying to develop a blood test for a chemical named mammary serum antigen, or MSA, which is secreted by breast cancer cells to see if we wanted to see if it could be used to identify the different stages of the cancer. But unfortunately, we weren't able to show that it could be used that way. There didn't seem to be any relationship between the level of that and the stage of the cancer. But that is different from the prostate serum antigen, or the PSA, where the levels in the blood can be used to detect prostate cancer and how advanced it is. From there, I did my PhD in cancer immunology, looking at particular immune cells that can attack cancer cells without prior recognition. That is, usually our immune cells need to be activated by exposure to foreign cells, etc. But these cells recognise foreign cells immediately and attack them straight away. After working in research for some time, I moved into administration within the Faculty of Medicine, where I gained a lot of experience in managing staff and maintaining and allocating resources. I was also responsible for the health and safety of the staff and students, so I did an OH&S management course. After one of the many restructuring exercises that seem to occur on a regular basis in universities, I moved away from the faculty and into university administration, where I was the safety officer for all research laboratories. During this time, I was drawn by my other love, teaching, to purchase a tutoring business, which my husband and I ran while I was also working at the uni. It was during my tutoring days that I discovered that some children have difficulty with learning to read because they're light sensitive, and the combination of white paper and fluorescent lights make it hard for them to see words clearly. This difficulty has nothing to do with intelligence or eyesight, and is called Irlens Syndrome, and originally it was called, and still is sometimes called, scotopic sensitivity. It's not only reading that's affected by this. It causes migraines, headaches, sleepiness, agitation, anxiety, light-induced epilepsy, an inability to comprehend what they read. And one parent told me just recently that before she got her Irlen lenses, she felt that she was outside of life and that she was actually looking on at a movie. When she put the lenses on, and this was just in the clinic, she said she felt that she was in the movie at last. She always felt like she was actually outside looking in. So trying to get all children screened for this condition in year 1 is where all of my present energies are directed, because the kids don't self-report, so nobody knows what's going on. This was the beginning of the present chapter of my life. I'm the Regional Director and Clinic Director of the Irlen Diagnostic Clinic, Newcastle, which is located in Wallsend. Our region covers from Gosford on the Central Coast, west to Mudgee and north to Coffs Harbour. And we have about 4,000 clients on our database. So that's how many people we've helped, and it's growing all the time. Despite all of the other rewarding things that I've done in my life, this is without doubt the most rewarding. We literally change children's and adults' lives every day. That sounds very dramatic, but believe me, it is the truth. I'll give you some examples. A young girl whose mother was told that she was almost legally blind and was prescribed and wore the appropriate corrective lenses. Her mother wondered how this could be when she was a successful sporting shooter, but the optometrist had no answer to that. Once she had her Irlen lenses on, she could read an eye chart on the wall better with just the Irlen lenses than she could with the corrective lenses. Her mother took her back to the optometrist and asked him to check her prescription with the Irlen lenses on, and she had 20/20 vision, and he couldn't believe it. So she just wears her Irlen lenses now and doesn't need prescription lenses. She also was able to get her learner's permit, which prior to coming to the clinic was not considered a possibility. This will allow her to do all of the things that most of us take for granted, but which her parents thought she would never do. A year 5 girl with albinism and very poor vision wears very thick corrective lenses. When reading with those lenses, she has to get very close to the page. With the correct tint, she was able to read the page from a normal distance. She could not go up and down stairs without holding on to someone. With her Irlen lenses, she walked up and down the stairs without holding on. Vision Australia was training her to use a white cane because when she walked, she bumped into objects like poles on the footpath, etc. With the Irlen lenses, she walked on the footpath and went around the objects. So she also will be able to get her learner's permit when she's old enough. That little girl's life has changed dramatically. A man in his 60s recently found that the reason he had not been able to learn at school was simply because he has Irlens Syndrome. He came to the clinic and found that he could read just by putting a specifically coloured overlay over the words. He thought that he couldn't read. He cried when he realised that the only thing that had stopped him from learning at school was that he had a visual processing problem called Irlens Syndrome. There are so many stories like these that demonstrate people's lives have been changed for the better once they realise that they are not stupid or dumb and that they can read when they thought that they couldn't. It's sad though when a person in their later years who has never been able to work because they believed that they couldn't read find out that they actually can read so long as they have the coloured overlay or wear the tinted lenses. Just as white paper makes it difficult to read for long, it is just as bad when writing on white paper. Writing is often messy, and this is because it's discomforting to write on white paper, so they try to get it done as quickly as possible. So I investigated getting coloured paper exercise books printed up, and now sell these online and locally to schools and individuals from all over Australia. I'm the only supplier of these in Australia. The UK has a company that actually sells coloured paper writing pads, but we're the only two people or places where you can actually buy them. Because most of the children who come to see us need some sort of help in catching up once they have their Irlen lenses, because Irlen lenses are not magic, they don't teach them the things they don't already know. I decided to, because most of the children come to see us need them, I usually spend a bit of time trying to give the parents ideas on what they can do at home to help their kids. But I don't have much time to do this in the time allocated. So I decided to sit down and write out an A4 sheet of strategies that they could actually use to try to teach their children the things that they've missed out on. But this A4 sheet turned into a book, which I self-published and is available online or from my website. What I want to do now, with your permission, is to finish my talk giving you some information about Irlens Syndrome. I've actually just got a brief PowerPoint presentation, which Margaret's going to press all the return buttons for me. So I think we'll either smash or crash. So if you just bear with me for a minute, please.
Has that got to be pointed at that?
This doesn't have to be.
No, so I can turn this round.
You need to. Oh yeah, you can turn it around.
Right.
Now I've got to redo all my cords.
No, it's all right. I'll come in a bit. You sure? Yeah.
Okay, so we're not. Do you want to bring a chair around?
No,
Yeah. Can we pinch this? There you go.
Well, thank you, Jo.
That's all right. That's any time. That's okay.
Right, okay. Right. Can you turn them off?
Okay, so could this little girl have Irlens Syndrome? If so, it may not become apparent until she's much older. She may or may not have learning difficulties in her next few years at school, but if she has, she'll probably be referred to a school counsellor, and from there may or may not be referred to a GP, educational psychologist, behavioural optometrist, occupational therapist, speech pathologist, and/or other professionals. Some of the professionals may provide some help in her difficulties, but if she has Irlens Syndrome and sees words differently from others, then any progress will be minimal, as it is like trying to read without reading glasses when you have a vision problem. It just doesn't happen. Unfortunately, the Department of Education will not allow school counsellors to even suggest that a child be assessed at an Irlen clinic, even though this is the only way that it can be identified. So that is my driving force at the moment. Yes, please. Children with Irlens Syndrome can display all or some of these symptoms. For some children, working in bright white lights on white paper, copying from whiteboards and smartboards all day can make them fidgety, restless, aggressive, tired, irritable, and in extreme cases refuse to do their work. They are often the slowest ones to finish copying their work and are often kept in at recess and lunch. Teachers think that they're lazy, but that is far from the truth. If they have Irlens Syndrome, they often lose their place on the board because they can't see the words properly. Many also copy one letter at a time, and they often get lost when they're trying to find out where they're up to. They often have trouble spelling because they have difficulty getting a good visual memory of the words. They often suffer from glare when using a computer. And sleepiness is another symptom of Irlen. Teachers may think that the child has had too many late nights when they get sleepy at school. But if the child has Irlens Syndrome, just having to read from white paper underneath bright white lights makes them sleepy. They don't understand why either. Even adults tell me that the same thing happens to them. And I've actually had some little children sit there beside me, and after about 5 minutes under the white lights, when I've asked them to do something for me, I can see their eyes starting to close and they actually are going to sleep. So it is a real thing that happens for them. Some adults and children can only read one page before it starts to put them to sleep. And as a result of having to work really hard to work out what the words are, staying focused on the words and coping with eye strain and mental fatigue, it is virtually impossible for some children to understand what they've read. When children try and try but get nowhere with their work, they start to withdraw from the education process and begin to give up. And that's when it all starts to fall apart for them. Yes, please, madam. Can you just click it 4 times, please? Well, till they all come up. Yep. Parents often ask if their child has dyslexia, and sometimes the child has already been diagnosed with dyslexia. A person with Irlens Syndrome will often display the same symptoms of dyslexia, but when they use their specific overlay or wear their specific tinted lenses, those symptoms often disappear immediately or they become less. White light is made up of the visible spectrum, the rainbow of colours, and each colour has a different wavelength and so travels through the air at different speeds, and as a result has a different amount of energy to the others. The longer wavelengths of light have less energy and travel more slowly than those with the shortest wavelength. People with Irlens Syndrome cannot process the entire spectrum. Hence, some of these wavelengths seem to interfere with their visual processing pathways, and what their brain sees is not what is on the paper. And each one now, please. Thanks. This slide demonstrates how the visual images can be distorted and how the overlays and the Irlen lenses can correct them. So in the top left hand, that's a person without Irlens Syndrome. So they're looking at a box and the box looks like a box. On the right hand side of that, they have got Irlens Syndrome, so some of the wavelengths of light are interfering with those visual pathways, and so the box doesn't look like a box anymore. Down the bottom on the left-hand side, there's an overlay on top of the box, so it's filtering out some of those wavelengths of light, and so that corrects the distortion. And the same thing happens with the lenses, which is on the bottom right. So what the lenses and the overlays do is simply filter out some of the wavelengths of light that seem to cause those distortions for people. Yes. These are SPECT scans of the brains of a person, or the brain of a person who has Irlens Syndrome. At the top, they're doing their task without their Irlen lenses on, so you can see the excessive activity in the brain. And there's also parts of the brain that are lit up that shouldn't normally be lit up if you're just doing a reading task. Down the bottom they've got their Irlens lenses on, and you can see how the brain's more normalised there. So that's why a lot of kids in particular can sometimes be misdiagnosed with ADD and ADHD, because they basically can't concentrate and they're fidgety. I've had children come in and sit in the clinic, and they'll be sitting beside you and their legs will be going, you know, they're fidgeting around like that. But if you get the right coloured overlay or the right coloured lens, they just calm right down. And oftentimes the parents will say, I've never seen them sit that quietly before. So it really does calm the brain. So Irlens syndrome is a brain problem, not an eyesight problem. Okay, thank you. Okay, in this one, oftentimes children don't have any troubles when they're reading large text, because it's not so busy in their span of recognition. Their span of recognition is the yellow areas that I've got on the slide. If you compare the number and size of words in the top oval to the bottom oval, you'll see that at the bottom, the child has a lot more, it's a lot busier within their span of recognition, and then that's where they often have difficulties. So sometimes kids just don't even have any problems until they get to about year 3 or 4, and then all of a sudden things start to fall apart, and it's because the print's getting smaller. Okay, thank you. Now, in the top paragraph, if you click that please, Margaret, the words are fading. So for some children, the fading comes and goes, and for others, the words totally disappear. When they refocus, they reappear again, but they disappear very quickly after they look at the words again. In the bottom paragraph, please, the words are moving in a wave-like fashion. And this can be either coming up off the page or staying flat on the page, but appearing to move across the page in a wave-like fashion. So some children experience nausea as a result of this. So if there are children, there are some kids who are in sick bay almost every day, and everyone thinks they're just putting it on, because that's what we do as parents as well as teachers. But there's a reason for it. When you deal with children every day like that in a one-on-one situation, you know that they're not telling you lies. There is something going on. Okay, please. In this one, hit it again, please, Margaret. There's that. No, return.
Return? You didn't tell me about return.
You know what I mean. No, the same one, sorry. The same one you went hitting. There we go. Okay, so for some people, the words actually swirl on the page like this. And we have adults who come in who tell me the same thing. It's not just children, adults experience stuff like this as well. And when they look at, if they experience that in the book, they'll experience that on the page. And for some people, they experience these distortions even in their environment. So they can be looking at, if they're in the playground, for example, if a child's in the playground, the tree can be looking really, really wavy. The ground can actually be waving up and down. And for some, when they look at the wall or the blackboard, the writing's swirling. So, it's not pleasant for these kids. But the actual fact is they don't ever tell you, because they think it's happening for everyone else. Okay, next one, please. In this one, where am I?
Shaking.
It's just shaking. Yep. Okay, so they'll say to you, the words are just doing that. Okay, next one, please, Margaret. Okay, some people experience doubling. So how can you possibly read if your words look like that? And at the bottom, for some people, their words merge together, so there are no gaps between the words. And for some, the words actually spread apart more. With the ones with the merging, I can tell you hopefully a quick story. A school counsellor rang me a few years ago, said, could his son have it? I said, well, maybe, from what you're telling me, but just get some coloured cellophane or something, put over the words and see whether it makes a difference. So they did that. His wife is the local GP, and when they put the cellophane over the words, she said, I didn't know that there were gaps between the words, and they're not moving now. So, you know, people, it's amazing what people put up with, and they just think it's just how it is. Okay, I think we can go to the next one now, please. We're nearly finished, thank heavens, they say. Okay, so these are just a small patch of journals that there are research articles in about Irlen, because one of the criticisms of Irlen is that there is no research, or the research is of poor quality. Most of those comments come from the Department of Education people or dyslexia groups who seem to have a major problem with Irlen for some. But there are over 300 articles about Irlen in peer-reviewed journals, and not all are positive, as you would expect, because that's normal for any rigorous analysis, but to say there's no research is just not correct. Another one is that everyone who goes to the Irlen clinic ends up with coloured lenses. My response to that follows: if 100 people went to the doctor with a temperature, sniffling nose, sore throat and a chest cough, it's likely that they would all receive a diagnosis of having a cold virus. But if 100 people just walked off the street into the doctor's office, it's unlikely that 100 of them would actually have a cold. The same applies to an Irlen clinic. If we were to take 100 children randomly off the street and assess them, we would definitely not find 100 of them with Irlen. But if 100 children come to the clinic with specific symptoms like reading difficulties, regular headaches, poor comprehension, a reluctance to read and poor spelling, it's very likely that they would all have Irlens syndrome as the cause of their difficulties. If someone's having trouble learning to read, despite having normal or above normal intelligence, and don't have an uncorrected eyesight problem, and are good at maths and other subjects, then the likelihood of them having Irlen as the cause of their problems is very high. So what I want to do now, I've just got a little video of a little Year 1 girl who was about to be put into a remedial class, and her mum brought her along and we assessed her, and you'll see the difference in her reading once we actually put the overlay on. It's only 3 minutes, I'll get down there and start it straight away. But thank you for listening to me, and I hope that it's helped everyone understand some of the difficulties that some of these children have. Thanks. Thank you.
So you don't need me?
I don't need you now, thanks. I don't think. Where's our vision? Where's our sound on? Oh, she's reading. Sorry, she's reading, but she's supposed to be talking. But our sound's gone. Maybe.
We haven't got any sound.
No, it was here before. I don't know. I'll just check the computer. I suppose it was going to be too much to expect, wasn't it?
The sound is low.
Well, that's my sound there. Show volume menu. Yeah, I'll try it. No, it's got to come through there.
And it's not going to do it?
It's not going to do it.
Okay.
Okay, what I might do, if I just get the microphone. Sorry about that, you know, technology. It was working earlier. What I might do, even though we haven't got the sound, you'll see the change in her body language once we actually put the overlay on top. Okay, so I'll just start it again. What I'll do is I'll just move it along a little bit, but here she's really struggling to see the words. That's her mum beside her, and you can see she's pointing at at the words, and she's doing it very, very slowly, and she's really struggling. So I'll just move it along a little bit. I think we're almost at the end of that page, so I think the next bit is where we'll put the overlay on. Sorry, that's me breathing. See how she's just immediately engaged, and she's really keen to read now. If you watch the fingers, even though we can't hear her, you'll see that the fingers are moving faster. What a shame. Sorry?
Any particular colour and whether
no, every person has a particular colour that works for them. Yeah. And for some, even with the lenses, when we're testing the final tints for the lenses, they can have, I usually try and get down to about four of their best. And there'll be some of those where they'll read quite well with one, but as soon as they start to read with the other, it just doesn't work. It's very specific. So you can see how keen she is. Okay, so that's just the difference. And I'm really sorry that you can't hear it, but we haven't got our technological guy here, so it was working this afternoon, but it's obviously gone to sleep and stayed asleep. Sorry? Who is Helen Irlen? She's a Californian psychologist, and she was the one who actually found that colour made a difference for people. She was teaching some women who were having trouble reading in a college, and I don't know exactly how it happened, but someone brought along an overlay one day, and it was just lying on top of some words, and someone walked past and said, "Oh, I can see those words really clearly now." And so she asked everyone to have a look at them, and for some it made it better, and for some it didn't. And so that's how the concept of the different colours, she brought in some different colours the next day, and found that each person has a particular colour that sort of works for them. Sorry? Yes, yeah. Okay, so I apologise about the sound, but that's it, I'll finish up now. Thanks. All I do is that.
As you may have realised, this is a second or third incarnation of our association. It was 21 years ago when we started this one again. One of the things that we made the decision to do was to start our years by the year we started, not the year we graduated. It's quite different from a lot of other associations. That way we're able to include everyone who actually went to the school. Had we done it the other way, we may not have been able to meet this wonderful person who, like many of us, finished at the end of the junior year and didn't go on to our senior years. Looking around over those 21 years at the tables, when you're sitting there, you look at the people you're sitting with, sometimes you go, I think I remember her, but I'm not too sure. But often you wonder just what people have done with their lives. Sometimes we don't have the time to go around our tables to find that out. One of the wonderful things that I've found out is with Joan, she's done the most amazing things with her life. A lot more from an ordinary life that she started to have to an extraordinary life that she's become. And I'd like to thank you, Joan, for tonight. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Thanks everyone.